Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. It just takes a second for everyone to join the room, and I know that we're expecting a few of you this evening, so welcome. We've just got a second before we get started, so I'll just let those numbers creep up, which I can see they're increasing now, which is great. Perfect. So just while everyone is joining us, before we get started this evening, I just wanted to run through some very brief ground rules. So this is designed to be an informal discussion session so that you have the opportunity to have your questions heard this evening, and we'll answer as many of these as we can. So any of the questions that either we don't have time to get back to you with, or we need to look into the answers for, then we will publish those on our blog shortly following this meeting. So you will find a toolbar either at the top or the bottom of your screen, so this depends on the device that you're using this evening. So within this you will find a Q&A and a chat box function. So if you have any questions for tonight's panel, please add any questions that you might have to the Q&A area, as this means that we're keeping them all in one place. So you can use the chat function for any comments that you might have. And as I say, we'll get through as many of these as we can, but if we don't get time to answer them all, we will follow these up following tonight's webinar. So this session will also be recorded and it will be available to view shortly following this meeting. So just to introduce our panel for this evening, so I'm Charlotte Bullard and I am BVNA's Education Manager. I've been in post since August 2019, and prior to that I was Programme Manager at an equine veterinary nursing training provider in Suffolk. I'm also due to complete my MSc in veterinary education this year, so while it's a bit of a different context, I completely understand the challenges that are associated with trying to study for a qualification in the pandemic. And throughout the past year, I've also been facilitating a VN educator network. So I've been chatting lots to educators and training providers about the kind of issues that students are facing this year. And the network aims to encourage educators to collaborate on some of these issues and hopefully work towards some solutions. So just to then introduce the rest of the panel. So first of all, I'll start off with Nikki. So Nikki Ruedisueli. Nikki is an RVN and began her veterinary nursing career at Liverpool University Small Animal Hospital before working in private and referral practice, and then to Mars UK providing nutritional technical advice to veterinary professionals. Nikki then moved to Nottingham Trent University in 2007, establishing and course leading the FDSC in veterinary nursing. She now works for the BVNA as Head of Learning and Development and still works in Small Animal Hospital at weekends. Then Sam Morgan. So Sam is an RVN also and qualified in 1999, and since then she has gained both medical and surgical diploma in advanced veterinary nursing, her assessor's qualification and the professional certificate in education. Sam is now one of 2 directors at Abbeydale VetLink in Monmouth, where she regularly teaches on the DIP-VN course there, and is also responsible for monitoring the progress and quality of the training provided by training practices. And then finally, I'm also joined by Molly. So Molly is a student veterinary nurse and she is one of our BVNA Council student members. She is currently a 3rd year SVN studying via the diploma route. And Molly will be helping me with fielding some of the questions that you've already been sending through. So thank you to anyone that has already contributed to the discussions this evening by sending through their questions via email. So we'll come through to all of those. So you may also notice a change to the lineup for this evening. So unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, Julie Dugmore has been unable to attend. However, we have managed to reach her to get some answers to some of the questions that you've already been sending through to us. She sends her apologies, but we will come through to her responses to the questions that we already have. And then if there are any other questions that we need to direct to the RCVS, then again, we'll do so following the meeting. So that just leaves me to hand over to Molly, if that's okay. So Molly, I'm just going to hand over just to start going through some of the questions that we've already received from delegates. But as I say, if anyone has any questions at all, please do feel free to pop those in the Q&A box as we go. And then I will dip in and out of those so that we can ask our panel any questions that come through throughout the course of this evening as well. So thank you, Molly.
you. Right, good evening. So we'll jump straight into the first question. So the first question is, we've had some questions around the hours that students need to complete to enable them to graduate. There are a number of students who won't complete these hours, which are around the 2,990 hours required by RCVS. Colleges have said that they will submit an exceptional case request to the RCVS, but are the RCVS accepting these cases, and will this extend to students completing for 2023?
Okay, thanks for that, Molly. So the main thing to say is that we've had a reply from Julie Dugmore regarding this. So concerning the 2,990 hours, these include your 1,800 clinical placement hours. So the current advice is that students need to complete their RCVS Day 1 skills for veterinary nurses in their totality. Okay, so this is just to make sure that you have competence at the point of registration. Now, there are instances where students have completed their Day 1 skills in fewer than the required 1,800 hours, but this will be assessed on a case-by-case basis. So this is with the application to register, and your college or university will manage this. So the good thing is that this is always being updated. So they last reviewed this again in December 2020. But Julie just wanted to add to this is that the RCVS Veterinary Nursing Department has also issued a guidance on the completion of RCVS Day 1 skills to all programme providers. So this is the colleges and universities. And this guidance includes the use of professional discussions, set tasks and simulation where appropriate. So the RCVS is constantly reviewing what can be done, but ultimately what they're trying to do is make sure that you reach, if you like, those Day 1 skills competencies in total. And you can do this in less than 1,800 hours, but you do need to make an application, or rather your college or university makes an application, and the RCVS will look at that and quality assure it to make sure that you have reached those standards that are required.
Okay, thank you. That's a bit more helpful, I think, definitely for me anyway. Going off that a little bit, so some students are finding it very difficult to find placements due to COVID-19, and they are quite concerned that they're going to fail the course because they haven't secured their experience. So going off of this, one particular student asked if they would fail the year if she doesn't find a placement, and will the governing body be able to help students who don't find placements over the next few weeks to months?
Yeah, again, this is a question we've put to Julie, but also actually at the BVNA we've been receiving quite a few phone calls and messages from students worrying about this. And the main thing to remember is that actually the RCVS do require all training providers, so this is your colleges and universities, to provide placements for you. Okay. So what they've done is they have done a review recently that conducted a review of all the training practices that were available within the UK. And according to that list, there are sufficient training placements available for student veterinary nurses, even during the pandemic. But we do know that it is difficult, especially in specific areas, and some practices aren't keen to take on students at this moment in time. But the training providers do have to be in regular contact with the RCVS, and they also have to give the RCVS regular updates on the challenges that they are facing. And as I say, that the placement provision, the universities do have to make sure, or the training providers do have to make sure that you do have a placement. So where a student or a cohort of students has had their time in practice impacted by COVID, and providers are identifying additional time within programs, or they should be, or this is what they're telling the RCVS, is that they're providing additional time within the program for students to complete their training requirements. And some have moved the timing of the placements to a later time in the program, so that they can reduce any issues with securing placements for the individual students. The other thing to say is that if any student feels that they're not able to achieve the hour requirement within a training practice, then they do need to go to their training provider in order to determine an alternative arrangement for those completion dates. So we can't comment on individual colleges and universities about whether, because one of the specific questions was, you know, will they fail that year? That is up to the college or university to decide that on what impact it has, whether you can't find placement. But as I say, from an RCVS point of view, is that they are in contact with the training providers, and the training providers have to explain how they're trying to support you through this process, how they're managing that placement for you to try and reduce the stress that you're feeling, but also to try and support you and help you with finding that placement. And remember, it's not just down to you on your own, it should be your training provider helping you with that as well.
Thank you, Nikki. Sam, did you have anything to add to that, just from sort of personal experience of being on the other side of that situation?
Yeah, certainly, you know, it's a slightly different. I do completely empathise with these poor students trying to get placements. Most of, you know, my students are employed, and I have a similar situation where they were furloughed during the first lockdown, and so then having to try and make up hours and study that way. And it is, you know, just going to be very much, let's see how we go and place things out as best we can, and trying to get their day one skills taught and competent enough that we can sit their OSCEs, because that's the important thing as well, is about completing those day one skills, is that you still have that license to practice exam that you need to sit from that point. So yeah, it is a tough situation, but I'm sure the RCVSA will consider to keep looking at this from a case-by-case basis. You know, we're almost a year into all of this now, and this is going to have long-lasting effects.
Thank you. So if we move on into the next question, which is regarding OSCEs, many students have had them cancelled in January for this year, and there's quite a bit of concern over whether this is going to keep happening in 2021. Other medical professionals have been allowed to graduate without having to sit practical exams. So what options are going to be offered to replace OSCEs so that students can graduate? And will the PBAs be extended into 2021 and furthermore going forward?
Okay, sorry, so this is down to Julie again. So the first thing to say about the OSCEs that have been cancelled in January is that the RCVS were under the impression that those students were all offered another time to sit them in the February. Also, the thing to say is that there aren't usually OSCEs offered in January and February. These were put in as extra, but our understanding is that you will have been given another option for those ones that are cancelled. And unfortunately, those ones were cancelled because this third lockdown came in, and what the City and Guilds obviously wanted to make sure that the health of their students that were coming to sit the exams, but also of their staff as well. So the decision was taken to cancel the ones in January, but to make sure that an alternative time was offered to those to February and March. The thing to say is that if you haven't been given an alternative date, then it is important that you do speak to your training provider, and they will be able to be in contact with the awarding organisations and make sure that they are arranging that for you. And I know that it has been incredibly frustrating for students, and there's been a lot between sort of the PBAs that were offered last year, and whether you take a PBA or whether you take the OSCE, and it is quite a difficult decision to make. And with regards to the PBAs being extended to 2021, they have been reviewed and they have been updated, and they are available for universities and awarding organisations if they want to use them. So what will have to happen is that the awarding organisation themselves, so that would be your City and Guilds, your Vet Skill and your QA currently, is that they're required to reach these, or to meet, if you like, the off-qual requirements. And the off-qual requirements mean that you have to be able to show that practical competency. So what will have to happen is that the awarding organisations, if they want to give an alternative or want to use the PBAs, will have to apply to off-qual, demonstrate how they're going to meet those standards, and then they do need to wait for authorization before they can deliver those adapted assessments. So that's sometimes why it seems like quite a long time from hearing about what new things are being put in place. But it is a little difficult with trying to fulfill those Ofqual regulations that stipulate that we have to be able to demonstrate practical application of those skills. So while we're hoping that OSCEs will be able to go on for the rest of the year, because a lot of providers now have got very good social distancing exams in place. And also, I'm aware that a number of universities have offered their spaces as well. So we can get those stations put up, if you like, in a socially distanced way. So my understanding is that the hope is that the OSCEs will carry on, but the PBAs are there if the awarding organisations want to utilise them.
Perfect, thank you. So another one again, circulating OSCEs. Someone has asked, so why do vet nurses have to take OSCEs when other medical professionals don't have to? Students have completed their MPL to show competence in these skills and also have a large number of hours in practice. So does this not demonstrate that SVNs are capable of day one skills and are able to bypass these?
I'll take that first, and then I don't know whether Sam's got anything to add to that. But again, from the RCVS point of view, is they just wanted to clarify that actually vet students aren't just being waged through and given honorary passes, okay? They do have to demonstrate those practical competencies. So it is really important that you understand that, certainly from a veterinary surgeon's point of view, that they do have to show their practical skills and those competencies. So they're not just being given honorary passes. So that's just to reassure you from that point of view. And what happens with the vet schools is that they have to assure the RCVS that all those day one competencies have been met through assessment before that graduation. Now, they can use alternative methods, okay, and that's down to the regulations. And as I alluded to before, the Ofqual regulations for veterinary nurses stipulates that you have to demonstrate practical skills. And whilst you're doing that with your MPLs, what has to happen is that those MPLs have to be quality assured. And the way that they're quality assured is through the OSCEs. So I'm not saying that anybody does this, but it is possible that clinical coaches or people in practice could just say, yes, you're competent, when actually you're not. And so what the training providers and what the awarding organisations have to demonstrate that you are actually practically competent at those skills, those day one skills. And the OSCEs are a way of quality assuring, if you like, the MPL and confirming that you are competent at those skills. So where it slightly differs with the vet schools is that they can use alternative methods, but they still have to demonstrate those skills. The nurses, if you like, don't have as much wiggle room, which is why the Vet Nurse Council came up with the PBAs. So if you think about the patient-based assessment, that's not a demonstration of practical skills from a direct point of view. Okay, we're not watching you do those practical skills, but it's about writing the cases you've been involved with and then demonstrating that you have that knowledge and you have managed that case. So that's why the PBAs were brought in, to try and alternate that, and they are available for use in 2021, but the awarding organisations need to apply for that.
Yeah, and I just chip in here. I just completely agree with Nikki that the OSCEs are this final rubber stamp, this standardised assessment, and I think I can't imagine how frustrating it must be to keep having your exam postponed. But ultimately, I think we need to bear in mind what we're doing is we're ensuring patient safety at the end of the day, that no one is getting through without making sure that they have these day one competencies, that we're ensuring animal welfare for the future of our profession, which is so important to us. And again, I'm not saying anyone's going to go into them without that in mind, but it does, help protect the profession for the future. from there. That's why, you know, I'm still a firm believer in the OSCEs.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well, Sam. Yeah, so I know people don't want to hear that, but what we are thinking of is the fact we're making such steps in the way that our profession is regarded, that what we want to make sure is that we do maintain those very high standards that we do have.
Yeah, definitely. Even as a student, I agree that we need to uphold these standards as well, even though it's so frustrating, but yeah, I completely agree. So moving on from that again, so some students don't seem to be getting any answers from their colleges or universities about concerns over OSCEs. Is there anyone out there that students can contact if they're not getting these answers from the colleges and universities, or anywhere they can go for advice or anything like that to try and help?
Yeah, this is a good one, isn't it? And my understanding of the process with the OSCEs is that the awarding organisation is in contact with the college and university about OSCE provision. And so the best people initially for you to contact will be the training provider, so will be your college or university. Now, remember that also that the educators are also having quite a tough time with all of this as well, because they're having to make very rapid changes in the way that they do the training, still maintaining those standards that they've got to maintain. So they'll also have some staff that will be furloughed, but other staff will have to pick up that work, and they're having to adapt, as I say, the training that they're giving you and the teaching that you're giving you. So you might find that it's a little bit longer time that they take to get back to you, but they should be maintaining that communication line. If you find that your college or university isn't getting back to you, then I would really advise you to contact your student support department within your training provider. And if you can go to them and say that, you know, what your concerns are, that you're not hearing back from the program staff at all, then they might be able to help you with that lines of communication. And it's somebody else that you can go to that has an understanding of the workings of the college and the university, will know the staff, and they'll be able to maintain that communication for you. We sometimes say that you could consider contacting the awarding organisation, but to be fair, that they have communicated to the colleges and universities, and they're a little bit further removed from you, so you might find that it takes them longer to get back to you, because again, with a lot of these organisations, a lot of people have been furloughed, so that's why you find that the communication takes a little bit longer than usual. So I would go to your college or university first. If your programme staff don't get back to you, lecturers don't get back to you, go to your student support services within your college or university and ask them for help, and they should be able to help you with that. Sam, have you got anything else to add to that?
Just really, as I say, from a personal point of view, we've, you know, our email accounts tripled as soon as lockdown happened, about the amount of emails we were getting, and absolutely getting back to every student, because they're so concerned, and in response to that, things do change on a weekly basis. You know, I'm lost, I always keep using this in meetings, I've lost this ability to be very proactive with things. I'm a planner, and I've had to turn to being very reactive, like, okay, there's an announcement new, what am I now doing about it? And we're you know, certainly providing the best we can for the students in that way.
Yeah, I think that's, thanks for that, Sam, because that is important to remember, is that not only are your educators having to jump through the hoops of the college and university, they're jumping through the hoops of the regulatory body and Ofqual as well. So they have got a lot on their plate, but we do know how stressful a time this is for you. And you know your lecturers, that they're going to be feeling for you. They know that you're stressed, and they're trying to do the best that they can to communicate with everybody and make sure that you know exactly what's going on. Sometimes that will break down, and there are other avenues for you to go to. So go to your student support services and ask them, and they'll be able to help from that point of view. You can also, we have spoken to a number, or I have spoken to a number of students. If you want to contact us, we might not be able to help directly, but what we can do is facilitate things. So what we have been doing is letting awarding organisations know concerns that students have, and the RCVS. and we've been letting them know. So we can facilitate things, but we can't directly impact things, but we can certainly let people know. And as you know, if you're a member of BVNA, then we do have the advisory service that you have access to. So what's important as well is don't sit at home and being stressed and worried on your own. There are people that you can contact. So please make sure that you are doing that.
Perfect, thank you. So another question is from a student who's in a similar position to myself. So we was always prepped for City and Guild OSCEs, but now that has changed to CQ OSCEs. Do you have any hints and tips on transitioning from City and Guilds to CQ? Because it's quite a stressful time on top of everything else, now swapping and changing to different OSCE standards. So if you've got any tips and tricks on that, that'd be really helpful as well.
Yeah, sure, I can take that one. Not, certainly as a training provider, we run the central qualifications OSCEs, but I have previously worked with what was the RCVS that then got adopted by City and Guild. So I have a fair understanding of that. And I would say, first of all, take a deep breath and don't panic. They're not wildly different. They're all set on day one skills, which is your NPL. That's where the whole basis of these OSCEs have come from. They're not all of a sudden going to pull in a weird and wonderful creature or something you've never seen before to examine you on that. So have a good look. Make sure you get the OSCE methodologies from your training provider and have a good look and a read through them. But like any OSCEs, when you're prepping for them, don't just read the lists, practice them, get that muscle memory, because you'll find you're not doing it in that set list. You're doing that, and have a practice with calculations. Take photos of things like radiography positioning so you can flick through your phone when you've got 5 minutes. It's all about creating that experience. But as I say, ultimately switching from across, don't panic that they're not wildly different. There's a few new tasks that wouldn't be in the City and Guilds one, but you will soon get those. You've done your MPL, you've done those day one competencies, and I'm sure your clinical coaches will support you as well with those differences.
If I can just add to that, Sam, with my educator hat on, is that remember, as Sam said, remember that these are nursing tasks. Try not to think of them as OSCE tasks, as exams, because if you go in with just knowing the methodology and nothing else, then you're more likely not to pass it. Okay, so this is a nursing task, and what you've got to think about, it's about health and safety. So it's health and safety of the patient, and it's health and safety of the staff, if you like, and the examiner and yourself. So if you're thinking it from a nursing task point of view, if you're stimulating them in practice, if you're, as Sam said, taking photos when you're doing positioning, constantly asking your team around you about making sure that you're doing it to as good a standard as you can. And as long as you're following health and safety rules, there shouldn't be any major things that you're forgetting. So try to come away from the fact that it's an exam and it's an OSCE. Think of it as a nursing task. I know you usually have a stuffed toy in front of you, but if this is an animal, what would I be doing with it? What is the purpose of this task? And come at it from that point of view, so a slightly different angle to it.
Thank you. So I've got all my questions done, so I was just going to head to the Q&A section, and we've had quite a lot come in. So the first one is from a student who's in her first year. She's got 111 hours coming up in March, but again, she's unable to find placements due to COVID. She has been told that we can use webinars, but they are quite expensive for a student. So is there any way that we can get that in without the use of webinars, or any other tips and tricks for that to help at all?
This is an interesting question. What I would say is that certainly as a BVNA student member, that we are looking to provide student-specific webinars in the near future. So we are relaunching our student membership package, if you like, and part of that is going to make sure that we're enabling students by providing webinars that certainly are affordable, and we're negotiating at the moment as how affordable those are. So we're going to make sure that certainly some of them are free for you. But yeah, it's quite important. But I'm not sure that that webinars take the place of placement. I don't know what they meant by that. So really what you'd have to do is ask your training provider. But certainly from the BVNA point of view is that we're certainly looking, as I say, at our student membership package that we will providing free webinars for students. And there are quite a few that are free out there at the moment, but you do have to search around for them a little bit more now. But there certainly will be some out there. But I will just double check about whether that means that, whether they mean that do your webinars during the time of your placement. I'm not quite sure what they mean by that question, but that's an interesting one. Yeah. Sam, have you got any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I wasn't sure how placement was being, thought of with webinars. I'm not sure it was me reading that question, but certainly say it's just, I keep repeating myself, it's just full of empathy for the current situation. Vaccines are coming out. It is, we're getting there. We're just in year one of your training. You will get there, I promise. And it must be so frustrating to you, but yeah, certainly keep calm and carry on, as they say, and we will get there. And as I say, you'll be that case by case basis, and then you'll look back once you're qualified and think, oh my gosh, how resilient I was to get through that year and be a student during 2020, 2021, and that's only added to my experience now in the future.
Perfect. Thank you both for your response to that question. We've had an interesting one come through, and I'm actually going to partially pose this to Molly, and you'll see why in a second. So one person says, I found the current arrangement stressful because training providers appear to be making decisions for students without involving students. Do you feel that students should have a voice in the process? So I suppose from training provider perspective, I'm going to start off with Sam for that one, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think students should have a voice and give those options where there are options. Sometimes there is a case where unfortunately there is no options. College, we get the government directive that colleges have to shut and go remote. That's no option, I'm afraid. We do have to do that and follow that, but certainly where there are options to be have, it is your qualification at the end. So yeah, I'm always in for the student's voice and getting opinions from there.
I was just going to add to that actually that usually you have a student rep that should be representing the student's voice to your training providers, to your course providers. So and certainly the way that the courses are developed is from the feedback from students. But what you might find at this point in time, why they're perhaps involving students less, is because they're being told what to do by the government or by the circumstances, and having to react from that point of view. But certainly it's really good to make sure that you have got a student rep that can go to your college or your university and make sure that your voices are heard, definitely.
Yeah, I think as well, from a student perspective, it's really important to have a voice and have a say in everything that's happening, because we are the ones that are being affected. But then also on the same hand, we kind of need to trust and believe that the processes are being made by our colleges and our universities, and they do have our best interests at heart. And even though half the time it doesn't feel like we're getting anywhere and we're not progressing, there's lots going on in the background. Again, BVNA are working really hard, and our CVS and everyone involved in the whole process is just really trying to drive things forward, because they don't want us being stuck in this situation for the next few years as much as we don't want to either. So I definitely think use your voice and try and help adapt to the situation, but then also we just need to sort of trust the process and know that everyone is trying to help, even though it doesn't feel like it sometimes, but we'll get there. And like Sam said, it'll be great at the end of it to say that we've got through this during a global pandemic, which is 10 times harder than usual. So yeah,
I think if nothing else, it really proves that you want to be a veterinary nurse. If you manage to qualify at the moment, it's no easy feat to manage to do that. So absolutely. Just going back to some of the other questions that we've had. So someone else has said, I'm worried about exams going ahead. We've missed out on so much compared to previous years, only having things online and not seeing anything physical. Studying online is full of technical errors and we haven't had the same level of teaching. So from what I've heard from the VN Educator Network, I know that particularly right at the beginning, having to get everything online was a massive challenge, particularly having to do it so quickly. And it may well be that obviously normally you would expect to go through a period of testing, then trying it out, seeing how it works, going back, revisiting it, making any changes. And obviously this time we just haven't had the benefit of time to be able to do that. Sam, I wonder if I can call on you to recall your experiences with having to do this.
Yeah, so basically to sum up 2020 is I learned lots about Zoom. So yes, we basically, the first lockdown, we shut our doors on the Thursday, and by the Monday we were having to teach online, having never done anything like that before. So it came with challenges, absolutely. I'd like to think we have learned lots and we are getting better at it for the need to have to keep our students safe. So this is the way we are delivering. I can't, won't deny that there are some technical hitches at times. So I would just keep that open dialogue with your training provider about what technical hitches you're having, seeing what can be done, what support can be put in place. There are various things that can be done to help you, and whether that's sort of one-to-one. I've had our students as well set up little Zoom groups themselves to help with studying and to help with socialization and just keeping on top, because it's so important. That's what they're missing, is that key soft skill of just talking to each other about what each other does in practice. And they've set up their own little study groups by doing that and creating little flashcards between them and testing each other. So that's worked really well as well, so that they've overcome their own technical challenges and technophobia with that as well. But yes, it was an eye-opener, I think is the key phrase.
Perfect, thank you. I don't know if either Nikki or Molly have anything to add to that.
No, I think it's just to say that it did have to be a very quick turnaround, because what educators were trying to do is limit the time that students are affected. It is a big difference doing it completely online. And I know what was interesting actually is that certainly with some university courses that students just don't turn up for lectures anyway. So what was nice is that then students complaining that they couldn't turn up for lectures. So actually it flipped itself round. But I think what's important is it is that social contact with being able to ask questions, being able to speak with your peers. And I think what Sam said there with some of her students setting up their own little Zoom groups, that's a really, really good idea. So maintaining those study groups, I think a lot of my students certainly used to find that very helpful, that they'd have study buddies. And if you can maintain that, although again, it's not face-to-face, it is better than nothing. So make sure that you're always asking the questions as well. So some of your teaching will be asynchronous, so it'll be recorded webinars, but some will be sort of via Zoom where you're actually live. So just make sure that you are still asking those questions, or emailing them later if you don't want to ask them in the Zoom environment. But it's just making sure that you are using your peers as well is really important.
Perfect, thank you both. I've got a question here about OSCEs, but more from a technical perspective actually. So how do we do OSCEs while socially distancing? For example, with a closed gloving task, a step is to ask the assistant to tie the gown. How can this be done whilst following government rules on social distance? Will our OSCE tasks on the day be tailored to ensure we don't have to get within 2 meters of the examiner? Another one is with bandaging tasks, we have to ask the examiner to help us move the patient. How can this be done from 2 meters away?
Okay, so certainly I've examined on a couple of occasions now through the pandemic, and from an examiner point of view, it's very easy to stay 2 meters away and still nicely observe a student doing a task. Don't forget as well that the major risk comes with the prolonged contact within 2 meters, so more than 15 minutes. It certainly doesn't take me more than 15 minutes or more than 15 seconds to just Velcro a back of a gown. And as an examiner, we have PPE on, so we have our gloves and our mask on. during the exam, and as a student you have your PPE on as well to keep that as a COVID secure environment. But I'm sure, you know, certainly the awarding organisation I work with, which is primarily Central Qualifications, is doing their utmost to ensure that biosecurity is kept super high through it. And I'm sure they're looking at tasks and making sure they're putting in tasks where prolonged face-to-face contact is not needed. And I say the majority of skills I can quite happily observe from 2 meters distance, keeping nice and safe with my PPE on, and making sure the students then are achieving what they need to do.
That's brilliant, thank you,
I think
Sam.
also that, I was just going to say, Charlotte, that what students need to remember is that the examiners won't want to be in contact with students either. So it is vitally important that they're risk assessing which tasks that you're doing and what impact that has on the examiners. So you'll have one examiner per station, but remember that examiner is seeing lots of students. So they have to put in place things that are COVID safe. So you need to be reassured that they don't want COVID any more than you do, and that the colleges and universities will be overseeing the fact that it does need to be very, very safe and causing at least risk as possible. So you just need to be assured that your colleges and universities will be feeling exactly the same as you and won't want that contact. So if tasks need to be adapted, they will be, but it's just think about that they're not going to make things difficult for you, and they're certainly not going to sort of have any impact on your health where possible. So they're going to keep those distances and adapt their tasks.
That's great, thank you both. I'm just aware of time, but we've got quite a few questions. So if you're all happy to stay online just for a little bit longer, we'll try and get through sort of a couple more, and then any that we're not able to get through, we'll follow up as a blog, as we've said. Sam, this might be one for you. So I've heard that we are a critical course, however, we're not allowed to attend university in person. Other critical courses are face-to-face. So my question is, why are we not allowed to?
It comes down to, you know, sort of the majority of our course can be delivered online. So keeping everyone safe as best we can do. Then that's the way we need to deliver. If, you know, absolutely during just before the lockdown, where it was just advisory, we were certainly running practical assessments and mocks socially distanced within a college environment. And we've got students prepping for OSCEs in the next few weeks, which we've certainly run socially distanced mock OSCE. So we've seen that as an essential education service from that point of view. But as for, you know, the day-to-day lectures, I know it's not the same. We cannot replace face-to-face teaching online, but we have to bear in mind we're keeping everyone safe, and not just that, we're also keeping your wider businesses and families safe by not pulling you in and having that close contact with each other while the government advice is there, because the numbers at the moment are just too high to do that. So you know, it's that wider picture, I think, all the time. As much as it affects, you know, it's so hard, it does affect your studying, it is so important to you, but it's just stepping back and just having a little bit of a wider view for this short period of time and making the best of what we can do right now, and delivering, and say that the key thing is a lot of you can get a lot out of the technical way. I know we all get Zoom fatigue, by the end of it. This is probably my 10th hour today on Zoom that we're going through, but it is what it is sometimes, and you know, we keep on going.
Absolutely, thank you. We've had quite a few questions where people are having to travel across the country to attend their OSCE examinations, and they're asking why their own centres, or why they're not able to complete OSCEs more locally. Is there any insight that anyone can provide on that at all?
Certainly, you know, I don't want to speak on behalf of CQ or any of the other awarding organisations, but from what I've seen, the setup at CQ to make them COVID secure might be hard to replicate in some of the smaller centres, about the distances that are needed, the space that is available, and just the extra facilities that they have with hand washing and PPE. I'm not sure every training provider would be able to do that. And, you know, I'm certainly speaking from a training provider that we used to run the OSCEs at our centre. It's a massive advantage for our students to be able to do that. We miss them dreadfully at the moment. We're just glad they're happening. But, you know, as soon as things are safe to do so, we'll be asking for them back. But we can appreciate the lengths the awarding organisation have gone to try and make them secure. And I can see maybe that why they're not replicated, being able to replicate in every centre currently.
Yeah, I would agree with that, unfortunately it is down to whether they can provide the social distancing and the COVID restrictions that they need to be able to apply. It also does depend on which awarding organisation you're with, because some of them have only got set centres in different parts of the country. So you're with a specific training awarding organisation, they only have those centres, which is why you have to travel. I know that some universities were offering their space, if you like, available for awarding organisations to use. But again, it has to be between the awarding organisation and the provider of the space, if you like, to come up with some sort of agreement that allows them to do that. So I think that they're trying to get as many centres open as they can so that you don't have to travel, because we know that travelling on top of doing the OSCE itself is hugely stressful, but it's just whether people can accommodate the COVID restrictions, and that's what's limiting things at the moment.
That's great, thank you both. I'm just going to start, there's so many questions. I'm just going to start to round things down, but I think we've probably just about got time for one more question. Here we go. So someone has asked, what is happening in regards to logging on the job training? As I was furloughed for a month, but the month before and after I was unable to get any college work done at work, as I am way under the hours for on the job training. So what would be advice you'd give to this person?
I would certainly go back and speak with your training provider about the issues you've been facing, because, you know, certainly from an apprenticeship point of view, you are entitled to those hours that on the job training. And obviously we're all well aware that when the pressure was on, that certain things had to get looked to one side and we all had to deal with it. But actually now, as your training progresses, you should be getting that support where you possibly can, and whether arrangements can be put in place for you to have a little bit of catch-up time, or, you know, start now, you know, building that into the rota that you have within practice, that you're getting that on the job training. But definitely your training provider should be the one assisting you with that, because they'll have that direct liaison with your training practice, who are there to provide you with that support.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Sam. While it would be tempting to carry on because there are so many questions which I was anticipating, I am going to draw this evening to a close there. But thank you everyone for submitting your questions and getting involved in the discussions. As I mentioned at numerous points today, we will be coming back to those questions, so please don't feel as though they're being ignored just because they're not being answered during this session. Obviously there's lots of you online this evening, which is fantastic, and it's really great for us to be able to provide that platform to give you a bit of support and to have your questions heard and answered where we can. So just to round things up really, so thank you very much everyone for joining us from home, and also for our panel this evening and for your time. I know everyone is incredibly busy at the moment, we really appreciate everyone for attending, including the panel, so thank you very much. And just to reiterate really that BVNA is here for the entire veterinary nursing profession, and this includes students. So if you are having issues, please do get in touch with us, please do get in touch with the member advisory service. We're here to listen to any of the queries and concerns that you might have. And just as a reminder, this webinar has been recorded, so it will be available shortly after tonight's meeting. When you leave the webinar this evening, you will be directed to a survey, so please do take the time to complete that. It's really important that we get your feedback, and we do listen to it, both myself and Nikki from the L&D department particularly, we do listen to it, but the BVNA as a whole we really, really appreciate your feedback. So it's really important that, given the opportunity, you voice your opinions, so we do listen to them. And then just to remind you that the next in our series of COVID-19 webinars is next Tuesday, so that's the 26th of January, and that's at 7:30 p.m. And that is about promoting wellbeing and good mental health for the year ahead. And that's with Katie Ford and Lisa Quigley from the Mind Matters initiative. So we hope to see lots of you there as well. So thank you very much, Nikki, Sam and Molly, for your time this evening. Very much appreciated. And as mentioned, we'll come back to you with answers to any of the outstanding questions as soon as we can. So take care, everyone. Bye for now.